Greetings and welcome to the home slice. This is a standard intro. If you already know what's up with my 40mm Manila rope testing, the ANDE rope test, then you can skip to this time listed on screen. This is where the actual edge test begins. If you haven't been here before, then you've caught me in the middle of a testing series where I'm taking Victorinox knives because they're simple steel that's mainly just steel. There's not a bunch of extra alloys and carbide things going on in them. And I'm testing what different sharpening stones do to them. I'm testing fine, medium, and coarse stones individually. Then I'm taking the best from those and I'm making what's called a dual grit edge. If you're new to the channel, a dual grit edge is where you sharpen one side coarse or medium and the other side of the edge you sharpen fine. It has some really interesting characteristics. Usually it creates an aggressive edge that lasts longer than it normally would with either coarse or fine, with some exceptions, which we're testing to find out. Anyway, my test consists of, I've got a little goofy rig that I slice through a 1 centimeter thick sisal rope, and it's on a 45-degree wedge. It's intended to transfer that force down, and then I measure how many kilograms of pressure it took to slice through the rope while holding the rope vertical. That's intended to take forward motion and quantify how much pressure it took to slice through. This gives you some rough idea of edge aggression. The next test is to cut through a 40mm thick Manila rope, and then I test on a best machine tester to test how keen and nice the edge stayed. I do that until it's over 400 grams on the best tester, checking with microscope and checking to see when it loses shaving capability in between tests. After 3, I will hammer the edge into a pine piano leg, and that's just to see if any of the edges break on impact. There are certain sharpening methods I've found that create an edge that's not as robust to impact tasks, and I want to kind of weed those out because for a working edge, I want it to be reasonably durable. Anyway, that's what we're testing for today. In just a second, we'll skip right over to the test footage, and I will let you know what the finishing stone that we're actually testing was.
Just a note before we get started, some guys have asked for scaling, and this is a measuring tape in millimeters. And as I try to get that mark on the left-hand side centered, I find I can't quite get the mark on the right on screen. So my best guess is that fully zoomed in, as all these tests are, my microscope, the full screen shoots about 1.8 millimeters. Now I've put 36 hyphens on screen, which means each of those is roughly 50 microns. So I'll bring that back later in the videos for scale. Alright, we're into the coarse stones. We've got the Crystolon Coarse stone on the coarse side of this edge and Suhira Serax 3000 grit. And we're looking at a reading of 2.8 as our max reading for the aggression. Kind of standard, really aggressive edge. We've got a lot of wavy texture, and if you look at it on scale with those 100 micron bars, I'd say some of those cutting structures that have been honed into the edge are probably on the order of like 20, 30, maybe even 40 microns a piece, each of those bars being 50 microns and the double bar being 100. And this is something that we've seen before with the Norton Crystolon stones. They can create this large amount of texture, but as I look at the edge, I don't see any foil, I don't see a glint out at the edge that suggests that this edge is unstable or that there's a lot of damaged metal out there that's been torn around. So very good in terms of the aggressive look, and the test will tell. First pass comes in at 301, a very, very good reading. Of course, the fine stones, good ones like the Sharpen 8K, have that really good first reading but then lose aggression quickly, where these dual grit edges settle out in the low to mid 300s, and even here we've got a new best score for the second pass at 282. At pass 3, we've come up to 316, which is right on par with the best edge that we have tested so far. Here we are back at the slicing rig, and we're looking at a 5.1 for the max reading there. This puts us kind of on par with some of our best, but not quite our absolute best edges. It's kind of your highly aggressive dual grit edge is somewhere in the 2 kg range usually at this point. You can definitely see that that 40 millimeter manila rope has smoothed out some of the texture along the side of the edge, but luckily it looks like we've still got some real stable and fine cutting structures up in the edge. Some sort of cutting teeth have not been totally rounded out. And during the testing of this edge, I could definitely feel that there was still a lot of life in the edge late in the game. So we'll have to see how far that actually takes us. But in the microscope, the cutting structures are looking quite nice. Onto that edge stability test, we'll hammer that thing into the pine piano leg in the corner with the 5 kg weight. And this is really to test to see whether the edges are good just for EDC or whether they would be good for impact tasks as well. This edge didn't test particularly well, losing 86 grams. That's on the high end of what I like to see, but we'll carry on rope testing it and make sure that we best test a different point because I'd like to see how the longevity is. You can see just a little bit of glint. It looks like one spot there in the middle kind of rolled over during the pine piano leg test, and very likely that was the very spot that we tested on. You can see that those little glints indicate a little bit of bending, so I wouldn't recommend this set of stones necessarily if you're trying to craft an edge where the purpose of your edge is to chop or to do things that require it to endure a lot of shock or abuse. However, the aggression is still pretty sky high in terms of the cutting action on the rope, so we'll head back to the 40 millimeter manila rope and give it some more testing. This is where things start to get pretty crazy. Now on the fourth pass we hit a 356, which is a clean new record over the Serax and Crystolon, which was kind of my most recommended dual grit edge so far. We finally take the crown from that Arkansas stone on that fifth pass with a reading of 341. And I'm thinking here that this is the best dual grit edge that we've tested, but then we hit a 348 on pass 6, which is absolutely ludicrous. We smashed through the 7th cut barrier with a 376, and we are into our 8th pass on a Victorinox knife through the ANDE rope with a 339, guys. We are solidly in broken record territory now. 9th cut, we've hit a 365, and I have to say, the feel during this test, the aggression didn't even start to give out until we had done 10 passes. So 374 was the number on our 10th pass. The aggression finally started to slow down on this knife at this point. We settled into a 386 and then finally hit our last pass through the rope at 12 times through a 40 millimeter manila rope at 432 grams best, which is an absolute smashing of the record. I just had to take a look at what this edge looked like after 12 passes through the ANDE rope, and I have to say, guys, there is no bending. It is absolutely still fine. It's got lots of texture, but those best readings were still good, and so I have to say, on a budget, and thus far, this is definitely my most recommended dual grit edge. I cannot believe it went through that ANDE rope 12 times. If you guys have got a Serax and a Norton, then you've got to let me know if this works for you as well. A link to my last test is on screen now, and for all the rest of you, I'll say peace out from the home slice. Have a good day.